Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Kevin Carpenter here. And today, for my first time, I get to interview with Frances Buontempo, if I said that right.
Yep.
Welcome, Frances. How you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thanks. Hi.
It is still morning for you, right? I'm
It
getting my
is.
time zone.
Got
Barely?
an
Just
hour
barely?
left. Hour left. And then midday.
Well, if I turn the camera, you'd see I'm still dark, but that's okay. So we're here to chat about your upcoming talk that we got going on at CPP Online. And again, for everyone, that starts February 29th for the main conference, February 20th for workshops. Chat your way out of a paper bag. How did that title come about?
This is partially Phil Nash's fault. We were batting some ideas backwards and forwards. So, two disparate things smashed together. On the one hand, I've previously given quite a few talks with subtitles of like diffusing your way out of a paper bag or evolving your way out of a paper bag. I've just used a simple setup of basically a rectangle with some blobs in that move around, either following diffusion equations, so Brownian motion, gradually move, or playing around with some machine learning or swarm optimization algorithms. So just a little nudge towards some background stuff on some stats and some machine learning and some AI things, but it's quite a nice visualization. So coding your way out of a paper bag is a thing. It's a silly thing, but it's a nice simple way of visualizing some quite complicated stuff. Meanwhile, I gave a talk at Meeting CPP in before times in 2019 entitled Can AI Replace Programmers? Yep. And we bounced around things, and I pulled on some genetic programming, which is a step beyond genetic algorithms. Basically, does some random stuff, but you can bolt in some test functions to drive things towards passing. And I got AI to code up FizzBuzz, but I think we concluded it was slightly horrific and took ages and was quicker to do it yourself. But of course, everyone's using chatgpt at the moment, and people have got Copilot in their IDE. So that's not really AI replacing programmers. It's maybe helping programmers. So I kind of mashed the two things together and wondered if we can chat GPT our way out of a paper bag. So it's about AI, really. And plot spoiler, large level language models aren't the only type of AI. Just leave that hanging.
As a neophyte, it's kind of interesting because I was looking so to a little bit of background, you've got a couple books. The first one, I think your Genetic Algorithms and Machine Learning book was your first book.
Yes. Yeah.
And I hadn't known about that one because I've been going through your C++ by example book, which I have to say is excellent. Like it would have been great to have that when I was going from 98 to C++ 11.
Right.
I really like the way you revisit Hello World, and it's like within the first chapter, you've got trailing return types, template, instantiation and everything else. But you do a great job explaining it. So for anybody that's returning to C++, and I don't know, I'd almost say even if it was, you couldn't, I don't think you could have it as your very first C++ book, but I think you do a great job explaining stuff. So I don't think you need a ton of C++ to get the value out of it. You want to check that, you want to check that book out. But back to the genetic algorithms and machine learning, you have a PhD in this, if I'm correct. Do you not?
Yep, I do. So that was from a long time ago. And I built some neural networks by hand in C++ back in a long time ago when there weren't loads of Python libraries that you just send in the numbers and get an answer back. So I know how this stuff works inside,
That's kind of a different thing, isn't it? I mean, when you really understand something on the inside of the core. When I was a kid, we had electronics class in school where I actually wired up, Z80 processors to memory. And it's like nothing teaches you addressing in a computer until you've actually wire wrapped something and sent the binary addresses through to get data out of the memory.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so my first programming job, we did some embedded stuff, but I sat with the hardware engineers occasionally and went, wow, and twiddled some things with tweezers. But that gave me a bit of a glimmer of what's going on. Yeah, not as hardcore as you, but yeah, I think a lot of programmers do like to look under the hood, take things to pieces, and work out how things work. We can't stop ourselves. That's how our brains work.
But it is interesting to me because with all the data lines and stuff we have now, it's like I get the theory of it, and I remember it. But I think where I was going with that is like you get this innate understanding that almost builds on intuition, which is the tooling talk I will give while we're at CPP Online. Cool. But it's those kinds of things that are just at the core, right? Because you understand all of the beneath layers. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you start forgetting details because you start learning new things. And you go, something like this. And you have to remind yourself once in a while. Yeah, learning's not a linear thing. It kind of spirals and circles and,
Oh my gosh, the things that we've forgotten because we learned something new. At least for me, I'm like, I used to know Perl at one point in time for some reason, but anyways.
Yeah, my dad always had a story about one of his colleagues. He said, my brain is finite, so I've got finite space to remember things. So I wouldn't remember pointless things like his car registration. He parked it one day, had forgotten where, reported the car as missing to the police, then found the car and was pulled over by the police driving home, and they asked his registration number. And he said, well, I don't know that. What a silly thing to know. But anyway, it all works out all right in the end. But yes, we have finite memory.
Yeah, that is for sure. So what was your first computer? What got you into computers when you were starting out?
My dad was a maths lecturer at a teacher training college around the corner and came home with a BBC Model B machine way back in about 84, 85. And he got the manual out and went, I'm not sitting down typing all this in. Give it to my teenage daughter and give her 10p for a couple of hours of typing. And I typed in the code to Pac-Man, and it was quite boring, but I could play Pac-Man afterwards. But I looked up what some of the instructions did, and I found out how to give myself 100 lives so I could get the best score ever. And there we go. Yeah, games.
That's cool. And it's interesting, too, because that machine is one that because when I talk with other people, it's like, what was your first machine? And, like Hannah Duskova is like, it was a Timex Sinclair. And so I've heard that one a bit, mine was a TI 99 4A, but I had not heard of that one before. So
I think in the UK that was quite prevalent. I think in the 80s a lot of schools got them, and it's been pushed as a great educational thing. And my dad was at a teacher's training college, which is why he got one of those. So a lot of people I know from England learned BBC Basic as their first language.
Very cool. So what do you feel is going to be the big difference now with AI? I mean, to your point, I've never done a lot with the genetic algorithms, so I will definitely have to check out your book. But large language models, from a tooling perspective, it's like I don't use Copilot as much. I'm starting to play with that more, but I definitely find, there's been times where I'm writing something in Go and I just haven't done, a piece of code in a while, and I can be like, hey, what would you do if I wanted to do this? And it can give me an outline that gets me about, we'll say 60% of the way there, definitely even ChatGPT for me has its errors in it. From one question to the next, it kind of builds, but once you reach a certain complication level, it seems to have forgot what it did before.
It doesn't have memory bolted in. That's part of how it works. It's just kind of randomly spewing. And you can tweak things as it has a bit of stat going on, but no, you're not like having a conversation with something with memory then. I've not played with Copilot in anger. I've just seen people using it and tried a few little examples myself. I've used ChatGPT a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
On one level, all it's really doing is surfing the internet for you and then spewing stuff that's like what it's seen. So
Right.
maybe that's a way of searching the internet. It's not the example that I did at meeting CPP when I was using something like genetic algorithms allow me to bolt in some tests and say, don't come back to me until you've got code that runs and passes these tests. And that's
Oh,
something that you can easily do with the language models. If you start using Copilot in your IDE, you can chat with it or make it generate code and then chat with it about what the errors are and things. But I don't see the mechanism to bolt in, make these tests pass. And I think that's missing from this whole chat way of doing things. But when you're chatting at things and it's based on a language model, it is just essentially doing like a Markov chain, like predictive text, just guessing
right.
the most likely word to come next. And to expect that to be able to write working code that passes tests is a bit of a leap. But by the same score, if you search the internet or find something on Stack Overflow or a blog, or even pick up a book, it may or may not be right. You need to still do a bit of work yourself.
Right. Well, I think that's, so back to your book, that's one of the things that with your C++ book, I thought it's really cool. It's like, as much as you're explaining different things in there, you've also, at least from the chapters I've seen, you've got really good links that it's like, okay, well, you can go find out more about this by looking at Andreas Furtick's, CPP Insights, or see Nikolai Jasudis's talk here and get more details there. So it's like, I think as developers, it's seldom that I have one page that gets me that answer the first time through even. Right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a point that I've put all the links in an appendix at the back so you can look things up. I wanted to write a short book that would just be enough to get you back up to speed with some quite common things. If you look at a lot of C++ books out there at the moment, they're like 500, 600, 700, 800 big reference
pages,
books.
yeah.
And they're really useful to look through and sometimes way quicker than like surfing the internet or something. But you can't sit down and just read them because they're too big and you're like, my brain's exploding. So I was trying to do just lines for everything, little, simple. Also come out with some things you could actually go away and code with and play with that are small and fit in your finite brain easily. That was my plan.
No, I think you came out to like 260 pages. I was kind of surprised when I first opened it, but it's like the breadth of what you cover in 9 chapters is actually really impressive.
Thank you. No, that was the plan, to do everything, but actually make sure you could pick the book up, and it was enough. So there's lots of bits I've not gone into depth with, and I'm aware of bits I've left out, but I think it's just simple things like putting things in a vector and then using some algorithms to do that, and then using ranges to play around with it. Just starting with a vector, and then you just suddenly get so many extra bits quite quickly and easily without having to know everything.
It's amazing how much we use vector, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's the go-to container, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I was doing some editing on a book as well, and it was just interesting because I say that because of like, it's also the base for, a couple of the other containers that you use. It's, with wrapper around it, and so but I remember doing C-style arrays and having to manually, reallocate if we needed to resize, and so it's like, it just works, it's reasonably performant, and in most cases it's the better way to go. And and so to your point with algorithms and such, there's just a lot more power in it.
No, there's definitely, you can pick your way through some nice bits of C++, and some of it can be simple and easy to use, but if you look right under the hood, you go, wow. And if you have ever implemented your own vector, I remember writing a circular buffer in C years and years and years ago, and that being like one of the first data structures I had to roll by hand that I needed. And hooray for C++ having some sensible tools for us to use.
Yeah, I know that we still use linked list, but linked list in C, my first time, that was probably my scary one.
Yes. I've implemented linked lists on a whiteboard in an interview more times than I care to mention, but never actually coded one up. Circular buffers was my thing. Yes.
Yeah, whiteboard coding. Oh, I'm glad I'm not looking for a position at the moment. Knock on wood.
They do say that ChatGPT is going to stop people getting sent a homework question to do over a weekend because there's no point if it'll generate the code for you. But of course, it frequently doesn't actually compile or work. So we'll see where this goes.
That is interesting too, because I've chatted with some, the community of speakers. It's like, I've chatted with people from Google and from Bloomberg, and even going through some of their interview process, and they're like, half the time the questions that the technical interviewers are giving, they can barely answer themselves. They're like, if we walk down the hall and give this interview question to, 4 out of 10 developers, they're going to be like, wait, what? And I get the point of them. But the position I'm at now, we did not whiteboard code, and I love the team I work with. And it's like, I want to know that you can learn, right? Can you?
Yes.
Because I think language is interesting. And when I say it that way, like all language, I've started studying German and Italian, and it's like, you get the basic words down by context, but then it's like to implement them, to speak something, to create something, that it's, okay, well, now I got to look up how I would do that. Or even, the way that we throw words together to make a story, you can't understand the story until you go through it. Like, you can't understand, existing legacy code until you've taken that time. And that's where I'm like, I need you to learn.
Yeah. And working on a legacy code base is very different to writing a data structure or an algorithm, which you can memorize if you do it enough times to practice for the interview, and then forget several months later, which is why people in the corridor can't answer. But also,
Yes.
like C++ is changing and evolving. If you're an expert today, you might not be an expert in 3 years' time. Things change and you need to keep learning. And
Yes.
so, like you said, you need somebody who can actually learn, or at least be honest and say, no, hang on, I don't get this. And then the whole dealing with legacy code and different ways people have written things and finding bugs in that and working your way through a process as well. Because everyone uses different tool chains, whether they're version control or whatever. So there's always more to learn. And no matter how clever you think you are, there's going to be something that'll floor you, and you need to just go, I need help at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, for everybody who has not already got a ticket, we have CPP Online coming on February 29th. There's some great workshops too on the 28th. If you get a ticket to one of the workshops, you get a full ticket to the conference. And you got to come see Frances's talk so that you can see about the learning of ChatGPT and how ChatGPT may or may not get us out of the paper bag.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. Yeah, so mine's billed as a keynote, so mine's going to be quite high level and just give you space to think and reflect and go away and play. But yeah, it looks like there's lots of deep dive technical talks, and there seems to be some poster exhibitions and some open spaces to chat. So quite excited about this. It's going to feel very different, I think, to just a series of talks. There's more going on.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is during the pandemic, we were all, everything started to go online, but now there's just so many conferences that have gone back to on-site only. And so it is kind of cool to see, this one coming out, the idea being it'll always be online. You can reach from anywhere in the world. I mean, even the timing is, I think the timing plays well. They took, I think it's 11 or noon UTC to 2200, so I know I'm giving my talk at 11 o'clock my local time. So better than 4 a.m. local time.
Yes, a lot of effort being put into thinking through how this will work. And there are a lot of people who can't afford to make it to one of the physical conferences, even if it's hotel bills or flights or something. And this hopefully be more inclusive and more diverse.
Yes.
We're looking forward to it.
So we will see everybody at the conference online on the 29th of February. Frances, I look forward to hearing your talk. And thanks for joining me this morning. It's great talking with you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Cool.
We'll talk more soon. See you soon.
See ya.